My rich brother said money couldn't buy class, then he lost everything overnight. My brother Grant liked to say that a room knew who belonged in it before anyone spoke. He said it the way other people repeated weather forecasts, as if taste, breeding, and worth were measurable conditions, and he alone had been given the instruments. At 39, Grant Vail owned 6 hotels, 3 apartment towers, a marina, and enough tailored Navy suits to make every photograph of him look as though it had been taken on the same profitable afternoon. Business magazines called him a visionary. Our parents called him proof that sacrifice paid off. I called him my brother, mostly because the English language did not offer a neutral word for someone who shared your childhood and later used it as ammunition. The night everything began, I was seated at the far end of a 40-foot table in the ballroom of the Halcyon, Grant's newest hotel. The room had once been the central hall of Union Station, the brick terminal our grandfather had saved from demolition. Grant had kept the arched windows, replaced the ticket counters with a champagne bar, and placed his own name in brass where the departure board used to hang. The dinner was supposed to raise money for the Vail Foundation's housing program. A string quartet played beneath chandeliers shaped like falling ice. Donors ate sea bass from plates edged in gold. Behind the service doors, I had passed 2 electricians arguing with the banquet manager because they had not been paid for 11 weeks. I wore a black dress I had bought secondhand and altered myself. It fit me well. That should not have mattered, but in Grant's world, a garment was less about how it looked than whether someone could recognize the label. Our mother noticed immediately. "You could have asked me," she whispered when I sat down. "Tonight is important for Grant." "It is a dress, Mom, not an act of sabotage." Across the table, Grant's wife Celeste tilted her head. "Vintage?" "Consignment." She smiled as though I had confessed to bringing my own cutlery. I had been invited because I still held 12% of Vail Meridian Group, the company Grant built from the property business our grandfather left us. My shares carried no salary, and under the voting agreement Grant had persuaded everyone to sign, almost no influence. They did, however, make my presence useful when he wanted donors to see a united family. Halfway through dinner, Lena Ruiz approached our table. Lena owned the electrical firm that had rewired the Halcyon. I knew her because I had helped her restructure debt after a hospital expansion delayed payments. She was proud, careful, and never asked for favors. That night, her face was pale. "Mr. Vail," she said quietly, "I need 5 minutes." Grant did not look up from the man beside him, a state pension advisor. "Talk to Martin." "I have. My final invoices are 90 days past due. I have payroll Friday." The advisor studied his wine. Celeste stared at the centerpiece. Grant finally raised his eyes. "This is not the time." "I was told payment would be released after tonight's refinancing closed." Something passed across Grant's face. It vanished quickly, but I had spent 12 years examining distressed companies. I knew the look of a person hearing confidential language in a public room. He stood and guided Lena away by the elbow. She removed his hand. I followed them into the corridor. "You will be paid," Grant said. "Showing up at my table makes you look desperate." "I am desperate. You owe my company $486,000. "The hotel owes you. Learn the difference." "You promised a personal guarantee." "Then show it to counsel." Lena's eyes filled, but her voice stayed level. "People refinance their homes to finish this job for you." Grant saw me standing there. Irritation sharpened into amusement. "Nora," he said, "did you come to rescue another person who failed to understand a contract? Did you come to raise money for housing while bankrupting the people who built your ballroom?" He laughed. Through the open doors, donors turned toward us. "You always mistake outrage for virtue." His gaze moved over my dress, my plain shoes, the silver watch Grandpa had given me when I passed my accounting exams. "That is the trouble with you. You think being earnest makes you refined." "I don't think about being refined." "Obviously." Celeste appeared behind him. So did our parents and half a dozen guests who had sensed entertainment. Grant lowered his voice just enough to pretend he was being kind. Money cannot buy class, Nora. Grandpa could have left you the whole company, and you would still walk into a gala dressed like the help and start a scene in the hallway. There was a small, collective silence. My mother looked at the floor. My father frowned at me, not him. Lena whispered, "I am sorry." I touched her arm. "You have nothing to apologize for." Then I looked at Grant. "You are right about one thing. Money cannot buy class." His smile returned because he thought I had surrendered. At 11:42 that night, after the speeches and the photographs and the pledge cards totaling $3 million, an envelope was slipped beneath the door of my apartment. Inside was a copy of a loan consent bearing my signature. I had never seen it before. The forged document was 8 pages long and very nearly perfect. It authorized Vail Meridian to pledge Union Station Holdings, the entity that owned the Halcyon and the land beneath it, as collateral for a $200 million revolving facility. My signature appeared above my typed name. The flourish on the N was right. The short downward stroke in Vail was wrong. Most people would not have noticed. I did because Grant had copied it from a holiday card I signed while standing at a kitchen counter. My hand had been cramped, and the pen had skipped between 2 letters. The same skip appeared on the consent. A yellow note was attached. "Ask why page 17 is missing from every board packet. Do not call me from your phone." There was no name. I photographed nothing. I put the papers in a fireproof document pouch, locked it inside the old steel cabinet in my office, and drove to a 24-hour copy center across town. From there, I sent a message through an encrypted portal to Miriam Shaw, an attorney who specialized in corporate investigations. Miriam and I had met during the collapse of a regional restaurant chain. She had the unnerving habit of listening without changing expression, which made liars over-explain and frightened clients tell the truth. At 7 the next morning, she sat across from me in a diner near the courthouse and read the consent twice. "If this was actually submitted to a lender, it is not a family disagreement," she said. "I know." "Do you?" She folded her hands. "Because families like yours have a way of renaming crimes. Forgery becomes pressure. Diversion becomes borrowing. Fraud becomes Grant being ambitious." I looked through the window at delivery trucks unloading produce. "I want to know whether he used it." "Your shareholder agreement gives you inspection rights." "Rights Grant has ignored for 3 years." "Then we ask formally." By 9, Miriam had sent a preservation notice and a demand for the complete refinancing file, board minutes, related party transactions, and all foundation transfers. She copied Vail Meridian's outside counsel and independent director, neither of whom could later claim they had not known. Grant called at 9:14. "What are you doing?" he asked without greeting. "Requesting records I am entitled to see." "You embarrassed me last night, so now you are playing lawyer?" "Did you sign my name to a collateral consent?" Silence lasted exactly 3 seconds. "Of course not." "Then producing the original should be easy." "You have no idea how financing works at this level." I had spent 6 years in forensic accounting and another 6 leading turnarounds for companies whose executives believed complexity could disguise insolvency. Grant knew that. He simply preferred the family version of me. Quiet Nora, practical Nora, the daughter who helped Grandpa reconcile invoices while Grant took him to golf tournaments. "Send the records," I said. "Call off your attorney." "Send the records." His voice changed. The anger softened into brotherly concern, which was more dangerous. "You are going to spook lenders and hurt Mom and Dad. Is that what you want?" If a records request can destroy the company, the request is not the problem. He hung up. By noon, my parents were in my office. My father closed the door with unnecessary force. "Grant says you have accused him of fraud," he said. "I asked for documents." "Through an attorney." "Because someone forged my signature." Mom pressed a hand to her necklace. "Grant would never do that." I showed them the consent, but not the anonymous note. Dad barely glanced at it. "You sign things and forget." I do not forget a $200 million pledge. You have always resented that your brother was willing to take risks. There it was, the family history polished smooth by repetition. Grant took risks. I kept score. Grant created. I criticized. When his risks worked, he was brilliant. When they failed, everyone nearby had lacked faith. Did either of you pledge your house to Vale Meridian? I asked. They exchanged a look. That is private, Dad said. It is a simple question. Grant refinanced some assets to complete the Halcyon. Temporary measures. Did you sign? We trust our son. You have 2 children. Mom's mouth tightened. Please do not make this about old wounds. Old wounds were what people called patterns when they wanted the injured person to stop pointing at them. After they left, Lena called. Vale Meridian had offered her 20 cents on the dollar if she signed a confidentiality agreement by 5 that afternoon. Do not sign without counsel, I told her. Can you fix this? I looked at the forged consent on my desk. I don't know yet. That evening, outside counsel responded to Miriam. The company would produce documents within 10 business days. 20 minutes later, the anonymous sender contacted me again, this time through the secure address Miriam had included in the preservation notice. My name is Owen Park. I am Vale Meridian's controller. There are no 10 days left. Owen chose a laundromat for our first meeting. Cameras, people, and enough noise, he said, feeding quarters into a machine he did not need. He was 45, narrow-shouldered, and exhausted. Also, Grant thinks nobody who works for him washes their own clothes. Miriam sat beside me. Start with page 17. Owen removed a folded schedule from inside a detergent box. It listed 12 loans, 9 special-purpose entities, and guarantees that crossed between them in a pattern designed to look diversified. In reality, every line led back to the same 3 properties: the Halcyon, the Marina, and my parents' estate. The board packets jump from 16 to 18, he said. Page 17 shows the cross-default triggers. If one lender accelerates, all of them can. How much cash does the group have? I asked. Usable cash? Maybe 9 million. Friday payroll and interest need 11. Grant had spent the previous night announcing gifts of $3 million. What about the refinancing? Miriam asked. It was supposed to fund this morning. The bank delayed because one tenant certificate did not match tax records. One? Owen gave a tired laugh. There are 14 leases with companies controlled by Grant's friends. They pay 1 month, Grant books 5 years of rent, and the valuation rises. Some spaces are empty. One tenant is a mailbox. He handed us a flash drive but kept his fingers around it. I downloaded only records I was authorized to access: general ledger, board packets, bank correspondence, foundation transfers. I did not alter anything. Why now? I asked. His eyes moved toward the spinning washers. My deputy refused to backdate a ledger entry. She was fired Tuesday. Yesterday, Grant told me to move $4 million from the Vale Foundation into the Halcyon account and classify it as a grant. The foundation's money was restricted. Donors had given it for housing repairs, tenant legal aid, and emergency grants. Using it to cover hotel debt could expose the directors personally and turn a liquidity crisis into criminal conduct. Did you move it? I moved $50,000, enough to keep insurance from lapsing. Then I reversed it and documented the instruction. I am not proud that I waited. Fear is not consent, I said. What matters is what you do next. Owen finally released the drive. For the next 36 hours, Miriam, 2 analysts from my firm, and I worked in a borrowed conference room. We created a timeline and matched every transfer to supporting records. Grant had not built a business so much as a chandelier of debt, impressive from below, dependent on one ceiling bolt no one was allowed to inspect. The forged consent was real. It had been submitted 6 weeks earlier. My parents' signatures appeared on a guarantee secured by their home, their retirement accounts, and a lake property Mom inherited from her sister. The notary stamp belonged to a former Vale Meridian employee who had moved overseas 8 months before the stated signing date. Worse, Grant had used the foundation as a silent lender for nearly 2 years. Money moved out on the last day of each quarter and returned just before auditors tested balances. The last transfer had not returned. At 2 in the morning, one of my analysts found my grandfather's trust account in the ledger. Grandpa had created a reserve to preserve Union Station if the hotel venture failed. The principal could not be used for operations without unanimous beneficiary consent. Grant had pledged it anyway, using my forged signature. I stared at the entry until the numbers blurred. Grandpa had spent Sunday mornings at the station long after trains stopped running, scraping paint from oak benches and cataloging old tiles. He did not care about luxury. He cared that a public building remained part of the city. Before he died, he made me promise that no lender would ever own the station because of a hotel gamble. Grant had turned that promise into collateral. At sunrise, Miriam laid out our choices. We could confront the board privately and demand Grant's resignation. We could notify the lenders. Because foundation funds and forged documents were involved, we also had reporting duties that could not be bargained away. If we warn Grant first, evidence may disappear, she said. If we warn the bank, the cross defaults hit, I said. They may hit anyway. The refinancing bank is already asking questions. My phone filled with messages from Mom. Grant had told them I planned a hostile takeover. Dad wrote that Grandpa would be ashamed of me for tearing apart his legacy. The cruelest lies use the voice of someone dead. I asked Owen whether vendors had any protection. Not if this becomes an uncontrolled liquidation. Could a receiver keep the healthy properties operating? If the court moves before Grant drains them? I thought of Lena's employees, the housekeepers at the Halcyon, the foundation applicants whose repair grants had vanished into chandeliers, my parents, who had trusted the wrong child and might lose their home. I also thought of the sentence Grant had delivered to a hallway full of donors. Money cannot buy class. He had meant class as a gate. Grandpa had meant it as conduct. Prepare the notices, I said, and a petition for an emergency receiver. Miriam studied me. Once this begins, you cannot control how far it goes. I am not trying to control the consequences. I closed the ledger. I am trying to stop him from choosing who pays them. The emergency board meeting took place Sunday afternoon in Grant's penthouse office. He had arranged the chairs so that he sat with the city behind him. Our parents occupied the sofa at his right. Celeste stood near the windows in cream silk, one hand wrapped around a coffee cup. The independent director, Samuel Price, attended by video. Miriam sat beside me. Owen had been placed on administrative leave that morning. Grant began with a presentation titled, Defending Vale Meridian. The first slide contained my photograph. This is absurd, I said. You demanded a meeting, he replied. You will hear the response. He told the board I had coordinated with a disgruntled employee to damage the company, depress valuations, and force a sale to clients of my restructuring firm. He called my document request reckless. He described the foundation transfers as short-term treasury management and the tenant arrangements as standard incentives. Then he displayed an email in which I had once written that the Halcyon project was over-leveraged. She has wanted me to fail for years, he said. Dad looked at me with bitter disappointment. Is that true? I wanted the project financed honestly. Grant clicked to the next slide, a photo of my apartment building, a modest brick cooperative. Nora's firm has never managed assets at our scale. Her lifestyle reflects her appetite, and there is nothing wrong with that. But caution becomes envy when it tries to punish achievement. Miriam leaned toward the microphone. This board is not here to review Ms. Vale's wardrobe or residence. It goes to motive. Forgerin goes to conduct, I said. We distributed copies of the loan consent, notary travel records, foundation ledger, and missing page 17. Samuel's face changed first. He removed his glasses and read the cross-default language twice. Grant barely glanced at the evidence. Preliminary drafts, accounting reallocations. My legal team will explain every item. Did I sign the consent? I asked. Your signature is on it. That was not my question. Mom began to cry. Please stop doing this to each other. I did not forge a family member's name, I said. There are not two equal sides here. Grant turned to our father. You gave me authority to complete the refinancing. Dad hesitated. I told you to do what was necessary. Did necessary include signing for Nora? Miriam asked. Don't twist my words. For the first time, fear showed beneath Grant's confidence. He needed Dad's vague approval to become explicit authorization. Dad, even after a lifetime of defending him, could not say the sentence. Samuel moved that Grant be suspended pending investigation and that the board accept a court-supervised restructuring. My 12%, Samuel's independent vote, and the foundation trustee's proxy were enough only if one of my parents joined us. Grant knew it. He walked to Mom and knelt in front of her. If they take control today, the banks will panic. The house, the company, everything Dad built will be sold. Nora knows that. Dad did not build this company, I said. Grandpa left property. Grant built the debt. My father stood. Enough. He voted with Grant. Mom followed him. The motion failed. Grant rose slowly, his composure restored. You see? The people who actually know me understand. I gathered my papers. Where are you going? Mom asked. To fulfill my legal duties. Grant blocked the door. If you notify the bank, I will sue you for every dollar you have. Then make sure your complaint includes the consent. Discovery should be interesting. He stepped closer. You think honesty makes you superior. It makes you small. People with class protect their family. I looked past him at our parents. Neither met my eyes. People with class do not use family as human collateral. Celeste set down her cup. Grant, let her leave. Something in her tone made him turn. It was not support for me. It was distance, the first careful step of someone moving away from a fire. At 5:15, Miriam filed the petition under seal. At 5:40, we sent the bank's fraud unit a notice disputing my signature. At 6, Samuel notified the foundation's insurer and state charity regulator. At 7:13, Grant posted a family photograph from the gala. His caption read, "Legacy is protected by loyalty." At 10, Mom called me. Your brother says the bank is delaying payroll because of you. Payroll was short before I found the consent. Can you withdraw the complaint for 1 week? No. He is your brother. And Lena's electricians are parents. The foundation's tenants are families. Owen is someone's husband. Why does Grant's relationship to me make everyone else less real? She had no answer. At 2:08 Monday morning, the refinancing bank formally terminated the loan commitment. At 2:17, the first cross-default notice went out. By dawn, the chandelier had begun to fall. My phone woke me at 5:36 Monday morning. The court had granted temporary relief. Vail Meridian's operating accounts were frozen except for court-approved payroll and essential expenses. Grant was barred from transferring assets or destroying records. A receiver would take control at 8. At 5:51, the senior lender accelerated its loans. At 6:04, a private equity partner exercised a fraud clause and suspended funding. At 6:22, Celeste's attorney filed a notice preserving her separate property. At 6:40, staff at the marina disabled Grant's access card because the property was subject to the receiver's order. At 7:03, the black card he used for everything from jet fuel to breakfast was declined in the Halcyon lobby. The images reached social media before 8. Grant at the front desk, furious, while a clerk held his card between two fingers. Grant's driver removing luggage from a leased SUV. Agents carrying document boxes from Vail Meridian's headquarters. By 9, Reporters had gathered outside every property bearing our name. People later said Grant lost everything overnight. That was not exactly true. He had lost it slowly, one lie and one signature at a time. Overnight was simply when ownership caught up with reality. I arrived at headquarters with Miriam and the receiver, a calm woman named Edith Cole, who wore running shoes with her gray suit. Security escorted us upstairs. Employees stood beside their desks, whispering. Some looked at me with hope. Others looked as if I had killed a patient to cure a fever. Grant was in the boardroom. "You did this," he said as soon as I entered. His tie was missing. He had always believed a tie distinguished command from labor. Without one, he looked younger and more dangerous. Edith handed him the order. "Mr. Vale, you have been suspended from operational authority. You may retain personal counsel. You may not access company systems or remove property." This is my company. The ownership and control questions will be determined by the court. Nora forged this crisis. "No," I said. "You forged my name." He swept a water glass from the table. It struck the wall and shattered. Edith did not blink. "Document that," she told security. For the next 12 hours, we tried to preserve operations. The hotels had guests, the apartments had elevators, the marina had fuel tanks, and 1,600 employees had lives that could not pause because Grant's image had collapsed. I called vendors and asked for 72 hours. Lena agreed to keep emergency crews available if the receiver recognized her invoices. She did not thank me. She should not have needed to. My parents arrived around noon. Dad looked 10 years older. The gate code at home stopped working. "The house is collateral," Miriam said. "The receiver secured all pledged property." Mom stared at Grant. "You said the house was a secondary guarantee." "It is temporary," he replied. "The bank says our signatures may be invalid." Grant's eyes moved to me. "Who told them that?" "I asked the bank for the original," Dad said. His voice shook. "The notary says we signed in her office on March 12th. Your mother was in surgery that day." The room became very quiet. Mom sat down. She had voted against an investigation less than 24 hours earlier. Now she looked at her son as if the face she knew had been projected over someone else's. "Did you sign for us?" she asked. Grant paced to the window. "You authorized me to protect the company." "Did you sign our names?" If the refinancing had closed, none of this would matter. Dad made a sound I had never heard from him. It was not a word. It was the noise of certainty breaking. Grant turned on me. "Happy now?" I was not. Vindication is often described as warmth, but mine felt cold. I had wanted my parents to see the truth. I had not wanted to watch the truth remove the floor beneath them. "No," I said. "I am busy trying to make payroll." At 3, Edith discovered Grant had attempted to transfer the company jet to a Delaware entity controlled by Celeste's brother. At 4, a judge expanded the asset freeze to Grant's personal accounts. At 6, the club where he had hosted donors suspended his membership. At 7, the landlord of his city penthouse posted notice that the unit was corporate property. By midnight, Grant had access to one personal checking account containing $3,814, a suitcase, and a room at the airport hotel paid for by his attorney. He called me from the lobby. "Tell the receiver the watch collection belongs to me. Provide receipts showing it was purchased with personal funds. You know those watches were gifts." "From whom?" He said nothing. "Grant, where did the foundation money go?" "You already think you know everything." "I know numbers. I am asking whether any of you remains capable of telling the truth." His voice dropped. "When this is over, no one will invite you anywhere. You will be the woman who destroyed her family." I looked around the temporary operations room. Housekeepers were receiving payroll instructions. A property manager had brought sandwiches. Owen, reinstated by the receiver, was reconciling cash beside an analyst who had not slept. "I am already in the room I chose," I said, and ended the call. The first week of the receivership separated the company into three categories: businesses that could survive, businesses that existed only on paper, and businesses that had been kept alive to support Grant's reputation. The Halcyon was beautiful and nearly insolvent. Occupancy reports had counted complimentary influencer stays as full-rate bookings. The marina made money, but its revenue had been pledged twice. 2 apartment towers were healthy. A third had serious water intrusion Grant had concealed from buyers. The foundation owed approved grants to 87 families and had less than $12,000 in its account. The $3 million pledged at the gala had not been collected. Several donors had conditioned their gifts on matching funds Grant never possessed. My firm accepted a limited engagement from the receiver at a court-approved rate. I disclosed my shareholding and refused any success fee. Grant's attorneys still accused me of engineering the crisis for profit. "Let him," Edith said. "We answer with ledgers." My parents moved into a furnished rental owned by friends. Mom called twice a day, first with questions and then with memories she was trying to reinterpret. "When your aunt died, Grant handled the lake house transfer," she said. "He told me probate required a blank signature page." "Do you still have the emails?" "Maybe." "Do not delete anything." Dad did not call. He sat through interviews with investigators and emerged angry at everyone except the son who had created the questions. Then the receiver found that his retirement account had secured an equipment loan for a yacht charter subsidiary with no boats. He came to my apartment that evening carrying a grocery bag full of papers. "I should have listened," he said. It was the first direct admission I had heard from him, but it was not yet an apology. I put on tea and sorted the documents by year. "Why didn't you?" He sounded certain. Grant always sounds certain. "And you always sounded critical." "Because I was reading the documents." Dad stared at the worn tabletop. Grant's dining table seated 26 and had been cut from a single walnut tree. Mine had a ring from a hot pan. For years, my father had treated those differences as evidence of our choices. Grant expanded, Nora settled. Now he ran his thumb over the mark as if discovering that modest furniture could remain in place. "I thought you wanted what he had," he said. "I wanted you to be proud of me without requiring him to fail first." He closed his eyes. "When Grant said money couldn't buy class, you looked at my dress," I continued. "You were embarrassed by me, not by the man refusing to pay workers." I was trying to keep peace. Peace for whom? He could not answer. We found 2 loan authorizations Dad had signed, and 4 he had not. I scanned everything for Miriam. Before he left, he stood in the doorway. "Your mother and I may lose the house." "I know." "Can your firm stop it?" This was the moment Grant had predicted. The family would need me, and I would reveal my envy by letting them suffer. A smaller, angrier part of me wanted to say that consequences were educational, but protecting myself did not require becoming cruel. "If the signatures were forged, Miriam can challenge the lien," I said. "If you knowingly guaranteed valid debt, I will help you make a plan. I will not use company or foundation money to save the house, and I will not lie." Dad nodded. "That is fair. It may not feel fair." "No." He looked down the hall. "But I am beginning to understand the difference." The next morning, Celeste requested a private meeting. She arrived without makeup, carrying a leather folder. "My attorney advised me not to speak to you," she said. "Then you should listen. Grant used my family trust as proof of liquidity. My signature may also be false." She gave me copies of messages in which Grant instructed his assistant to recreate signature pages from prior agreements. One message mentioned mine by name. "Use Nora's Christmas note. Her formal signature is too easy to challenge." For a moment, the room tilted. "You knew he was moving money," I said. "I knew he was aggressive. I did not know this." "You watched him humiliate contractors. You helped him humiliate me." Her chin lifted, then fell. "Yes." It was not enough, but it was true. Why bring this now? Because he asked me to say you approved the consent at Christmas dinner. And? I will not. Money could purchase silence for a long time. Losing it did not create character, but sometimes it removed the rewards for pretending not to see. I passed the folder to Miriam. The emergency hearing drew more spectators than the courtroom could hold. Grant entered through the front doors in the only suit the receiver had released to him. He smiled for cameras and told a reporter he looked forward to clearing his name. By the time he sat down, 3 former employees had filed declarations, and the state charity regulator had joined the case. His attorneys argued that the receivership was excessive, the liquidity crisis temporary, and my actions motivated by a sibling dispute. They described Grant as the visionary who had multiplied our grandfather's modest holdings into a regional landmark portfolio. Then they called my father. Dad testified that he had broadly authorized Grant to arrange financing. Grant's attorney guided him carefully toward the claim that family members often signed routine documents for one another. Did Nora know the company needed refinancing? The attorney asked. Yes. Did she benefit from the increase in value? On paper. And did she ever object to her brother handling administrative matters? Dad looked at me. She objected often. I did not listen. The attorney paused. That was not my question. It is my answer. On cross-examination, Miriam showed him the guarantee dated during Mom's surgery. Is that your signature? No. Did you authorize Grant to sign your wife's name while she was under anesthesia? No. Did you authorize him to forge Nora's consent? Dad turned toward Grant. No. My brother's expression did not change, but his hand closed around a pen until his knuckles whitened. Owen testified next. He explained the cross-default schedule, fake leases, and quarterly foundation transfers. Grant's attorneys attacked his timing and suggested he had copied files to protect himself from termination. I am protecting myself, Owen said, by telling the truth before Mr. Vale asks me to commit another crime. Celeste authenticated the messages about recycled signatures. She did not look at Grant once. Then I took the stand. Grant's attorney asked about my income, my apartment, my criticism of the Halcyon, and an offer my firm had once made to purchase distressed debt from an unrelated Vale project. He wanted Envy to become a financial model. You believed your brother was reckless before you saw the disputed consent, correct? Yes. You believed you were more qualified to lead the company. I believed I was more qualified to read its cash flow statement. Laughter moved through the gallery. The judge silenced it. You resented his success. I resented unpaid workers, stolen charity funds, and my forged signature. But you understood reporting the signature could trigger defaults and destroy billions in enterprise value. I understood concealing it would let lenders advance more money on false information. He displayed the gala photograph. Isn't it true that hours before you reported this matter, your brother criticized your appearance in front of donors? Yes. He said money could not buy class. Yes. And the next business day, he had lost access to his company and personal assets. The next business day, the court prevented him from moving assets he had obtained through misrepresentation. Convenient revenge, Ms. Vale. I leaned toward the microphone. I did not create the debt, the false leases, the missing foundation money, or the forged documents. If telling the truth feels like revenge, that is because the lie was profitable. The courtroom went still. After closing arguments, the judge ruled from the bench. The receivership would remain. Grant was removed as chief executive pending further proceedings. The court referred the signature evidence to prosecutors and authorized a structured sale of non-essential assets. Most importantly to me, employee wages, critical vendors, and restricted foundation obligations would be prioritized wherever law allowed. Outside, reporters crowded the steps. Grant pushed toward me. You rehearsed that line, he said. No. You think they respect you now? They are using you. Perhaps. That is why I read agreements before signing them. His face twisted. Grandpa left you 12% because he felt sorry for you. Grandpa left me 12% because you asked him for the rest. Security moved between us. Grant lowered his voice. I can still fix this if you support a debtor-in-possession loan. Tell Edith the foundation transfers were authorized. We preserve the hotels, sell the apartments, and everyone gets paid. The proposed lender is controlled by Celeste's brother. His eyes flickered. And the term sheet gives you a consulting fee and releases your personal guarantees, I continued. No. Then Mom and Dad lose their home. You pledged their home. But you can save it. Not by making your victims pay twice. For the first time in my life, my brother had no audience he could persuade and no account he could access. He stood on courthouse steps in a tailored suit that did not belong to him until the receiver verified the receipt. He had spent years confusing possession with permanence. Now, the difference was on the record. The sale process lasted 5 months. Headlines moved on after 2 weeks, but collapse is quieter after the cameras leave. It lives in vendor meetings, insurance renewals, severance calculations, and calls to employees who want to know whether they should enroll their children in summer camp. We sold the jet, the leased vehicles, the wine collection, and 3 undeveloped parcels. Grant's watches turned out to have been purchased through a client relations account. Celeste returned 2. The rest had already been sold. The apartment towers attracted legitimate buyers. The marina debt was restructured. The fake tenant entities disappeared as soon as someone requested beneficial ownership records. The Halcyon was the hardest decision. A liquidation bid would pay the senior bank and almost nobody else. A hospitality group offered more if it could dismiss most staff and convert public areas into private event space. Grant urged the court to accept it, calling sentiment an unaffordable luxury. I assembled another option. Lena introduced me to a coalition of local contractors. Owen built a clean operating model based on actual occupancy. The city agreed to preserve historic tax credits if Union Station remained publicly accessible. A pension fund that had walked away from Grant offered patient capital under independent governance. Employees would receive profit-sharing units. Vendors would recover more over 3 years than in an immediate liquidation. I invested my savings and pledged my legitimate Vail shares, not my parents' house or anyone's forged consent. Our bid was not the highest on day 1. It was the best after fees, litigation risk, tax credit repayment, and community obligations were counted. Edith recommended it. Grant objected. At the sale hearing, he called my group inexperienced opportunists acquiring his masterpiece at a discount. You cannot steal my name and call it stewardship, he told me in the corridor. We are removing your name. The hotel would become Union Hall again. The judge approved our plan. Lena received the first installment on her invoices 3 days later. She used it to restore health coverage for her employees and rehire 2 apprentices she had laid off. When I apologized for how long it had taken, she shook her head. An apology from you is not the check I needed from him, she said. Then she smiled slightly. But the check cleared. The foundation recovered enough from insurance and asset claims to honor every approved emergency grant. We dissolved the Vail name from it and created an independent board that included a tenant advocate, a contractor, and a former grant recipient. My mother resigned as ceremonial chair without protest. The lien on my parents' home was invalidated because their signatures had been forged. They still had to sell the lake property to cover loans Dad had knowingly guaranteed. They moved into a smaller house and, for the first time in decades, learned the price of groceries. Mom apologized in stages. First, she apologized that the family had become divided. I told her division was not the injury. Then she apologized that feelings had been hurt. I told her humiliation was a choice, not weather. Finally, one afternoon while we unpacked dishes in her new kitchen, she said, I taught Grant that charm could erase harm, and I taught you that being strong meant needing less. I am sorry. That apology I accepted. Dad joined a financial literacy program at the community center, initially as a participant and later as a volunteer. He did not tell people his son had been rich. He told them he had signed documents he did not understand because pride made questions feel embarrassing. Grant rejected every plea proposal until prosecutors added obstruction charges related to the attempted jet transfer. Faced with trial, he pleaded guilty to bank fraud, wire fraud, and misuse of charitable assets. The sentence hearing was scheduled for autumn. He sent me letters through his attorney. In the first, he blamed Owen. In the second, Celeste. In the third, our father. The fourth contained only one page. "You always wanted my life. Now you have it." I wrote back once, "I have my life. That was the part you never understood." I did not send another reply. Union Hall reopened 1 year after the gala. We removed the gold-edged plates and sold them to fund apprenticeship grants. The champagne bar became a bakery kiosk operated by a woman who had received one of the foundation's first emergency grants. The ballroom still held weddings, but weekday afternoons belonged to public lectures, job fairs, and local musicians. The brass letters spelling Grant Vale were replaced by a restored departure board. The reopening guest list included every employee and contractor before it included donors. I wore the same black consignment dress. Mom recognized it while helping at registration. "You did that on purpose." "It still fits." She laughed, then became serious. "You looked beautiful that night too. I should have said it." Yes. We had learned that honesty did not need to be softened to count as love. Before the ceremony, I walked through the old waiting room with Lena. Her crew had uncovered a mosaic beneath a wall Grant installed for digital advertising. It showed blue rivers running between goldfields, chipped in places, but intact. "He covered this?" I asked. Said it looked provincial. We left the chips visible. Restoration, like accountability, did not require pretending damage had never happened. Dad stood at the back of the ballroom. He no longer expected the front table. Owen, now chief financial officer under an independent board, presented audited statements that fit on 6 clear pages. The hotel had made a modest profit in its first 2 quarters. All employees had received their first profit-sharing allocation. No magazine called us visionary. I had never been prouder of a set of ordinary numbers. At noon, the judge's clerk called Miriam. Grant had been sentenced to 46 months in federal prison, followed by supervised release and restitution. It was less than some vendors wanted and more than our parents had feared. Mom sat alone in a quiet office when I told her. She covered her face and cried. "I know he did this," she said. "I know the sentence is not your fault. I still remember him at 6 years old, sleeping with the hall light on." I sat beside her. "You can love who he was and stop protecting what he became." "Do you hate him?" I considered the question. "No, I hate what he did. I do not trust him. I will not rescue him from consequences. Those things can all be true." She nodded and took my hand. The ceremony began without a ribbon. Instead, 12 apprentices unlocked the restored station doors together. People flowed in from the street, families, workers, curious tourists, donors who had stayed, and some who had returned after the scandal. The room did not ask who belonged before they spoke. During my remarks, I did not mention Grant's sentence. "This building was never saved by one family," I said. "It was saved by masons, electricians, housekeepers, cooks, engineers, clerks, guests, taxpayers, and neighbors. A name on a wall is not a legacy. The way an institution treats people when money is tight, that is its legacy." Lena stood in the front row with her employees. Dad looked down. Mom did not. Afterward, a young server stopped me near the old ticket windows. "Ms. Vale, is it true your brother used to own all this?" "He controlled it." "What's the difference?" I looked at the crowded hall. Control is what documents give you. Ownership is what people assume will last. Stewardship is what you do while both are temporary. He thought about that and nodded. That evening, when the last guests left, I found an envelope on my desk. Grant had mailed it before sentencing. Inside was a photograph of us as children at Union Station. He was 11, holding Grandpa's hammer. I was 8, wearing safety goggles too large for my face. On the back, Grant had written, "You made them think you were the good one." I placed the photograph in a drawer, not because his accusation was true, but because answering it would keep me inside the contest he had invented. Goodness was not a family position. Class was not a bloodline. Neither was proven by winning. They were choices, usually made when no one useful was watching. 3 years later, I saw Grant for the first time after his release. He asked to meet at Union Hall. Miriam advised a public place and no discussion of active restitution matters. I chose the bakery kiosk at 10 on a Tuesday morning when the station was busy enough to be safe and quiet enough to speak. He arrived early. Prison had not transformed him into a different man. That disappointed the part of me raised on stories where punishment produced wisdom. He was thinner, gray at the temples, and dressed in clothes that fit poorly. But his posture remained exact, his attention alert to who noticed him. He watched me approach in a navy suit I had owned for 5 years. "You kept the old dress," he said. "Hello, Grant." We ordered coffee. His card cleared. He noticed me noticing and gave a humorless smile. "Construction consulting," he said. "Small firm. They know my record." "I am glad you are working." "Are you?" "Yes." He looked around the waiting room. The mosaic glowed in the morning light. Children pressed their hands to the glass around a model train. A porter directed an elderly couple toward the elevators. "You made it quaint," he said. "We made it solvent." "I hear you are opening another location." "We are advising another station project. We do not own it." "Still afraid to build an empire?" "Still confusing size with success?" For a second, we were back at a family table, our roles ready and waiting. Then Grant exhaled. "Fair." It was the first concession I had ever heard him make without attaching a bargain. He said our parents visited him every month in prison. I knew. He said Celeste had remarried. I knew that too. He said restitution would take most of his earnings for years. "I lost everything in one night," he said. "No, you lost access in one night. You spent years losing it." His jaw tightened. "You always need the precise version. The precise version keeps other people from carrying your blame." He turned the coffee cup between his hands. "Did you ever laugh?" "At what?" "The card declining. The club canceling me, the photographs of the car being taken. After what I said to you at the gala, did you laugh?" I remembered that morning. The alerts, the court order, my parents at the boardroom table, employees waiting to hear whether payroll would arrive. There had been no laughter in it. "No," I said. Lena laughed when her final check cleared. Owen laughed when the first clean audit came back. Mom laughed when she learned to paint her own kitchen. I laughed at those things. He studied me, perhaps searching for cruelty and finding nothing he could use. "You think that makes you better than me?" "I think it makes me free of you." The words landed gently. That was why they landed at all. Grant looked toward the brass departure board. "I meant what I said that night. Money couldn't buy class." "You were right." "But I was talking about you." "That was the part you got wrong." He almost smiled. "Do you believe people can change?" "Yes." "Do you believe I can?" "That is not a decision I get to make for you." He nodded slowly. Before leaving, he placed cash beneath his cup, enough for the coffee and a generous tip. He did not announce it. He did not wait for the server to notice. I watched him cross the hall and disappear through the station doors. I did not call after him. Reconciliation was not a single meeting, and forgiveness was not a key that restored old access. If Grant changed, it would happen in small acts repeated without applause. If he did not, my life would remain whole. That afternoon, the board approved the final repayment to the contractors who had accepted deferred settlements. Lena came to my office with a grocery store cake iced in crooked blue letters, "Paid in full." It was this or champagne, she said. The cake seemed classier. I laughed then, loudly, helplessly, with people who had stayed through the unglamorous work after the scandal. We cut uneven slices with plastic forks and ate beside audited statements, union contracts, and a photograph of the restored mosaic. For years, Grant had treated class as an invisible membership card, something inherited by people who knew the right labels and never mentioned the bill. He had been wrong. Class was paying the bill when nobody could force you. It was admitting harm without asking the injured person to make the confession comfortable. It was choosing truth when a lie offered better seating. Money could buy a ballroom, a headline, a tailored suit, and a table long enough to place inconvenient people at the far end. It could buy the appearance of permanence right up until morning, but it could not buy what Grant had tried to sell, and when everything he had purchased disappeared overnight, what remained was not my last laugh at his ruin. It was the life I had built without needing him to lose.